Welcome to the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Gass-Poore, a health and science reporter. Join me as we cover advancements being made in health informatics and explainable AI for students, researchers, and healthcare practitioners interested in applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. This podcast is produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory at the University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences Department of Health Information Management. Headed by Ahmad Tafti, Pitt HexAI Lab cultivates extramural collaborations with academic institutions both nationally and internationally through its research, educational contributions, and this podcast series. Hello and welcome back to Pitt HexAI, a podcast series produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory. I'm Jordan Gass-Poore, your host, and today we're going to speak with Natalia Díaz Rodríguez, who's a professor specializing in trustworthy AI and responsible AI systems at the University of Granada, Spain, and a researcher with the Data Science Institute, specializing in data science and artificial intelligence. Welcome, Natalia. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Hello, the pleasure is mine. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So looking through about all of your interests and your research and your work, it all seems quite amazing and very much over my head as a journalist by trade. So I'd really like to just dive in and be able to get to know you a little bit better. Taking a step back a little bit about our podcast, if you're not familiar with it, that our research lab is particularly interested in explainable AI. And we're excited to have you on the show to talk about your work. If you would please, want to get a little bit of introduction about who you are and the kind of work that you do, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I am professor at the University of Granada in Andalusia, Spain. It's particularly in the Data Science and Computational Intelligence Andalusian Institute of AI. I came back 2 years ago after being professor in Paris at the Institut Polytechnique. I've been also living. I did my PhD in Finland in good old-fashioned AI, and I also ontology, semantic web, and then I also was in the US in Silicon Valley working both in industry and in academia and several other places all over the world. And I finally came back to my roots, where I've been now for 2 years. So I'm specializing, as you said, on trustworthy AI and explainable AI in order to comply with all upcoming regulation that is never always changing, and we need to adapt as fast as techniques change in order to comply with it. So yeah, that's what takes my sleep nowadays.
Well, what got you interested to begin with in artificial intelligence?
Well, I guess I didn't get a computer quite early. I got it when I was already like 14 years old, and my internet perhaps came at 17. So therefore, studying computer engineering was for me like the window that was most open to learning about the unknown, and for me that felt exciting. So I felt curiosity to learn more, and then the more I learned about AI, the more I thought that you could do cool stuff that never exist and automate things and learn to become better. So the more I learned about it, the more I thought that AI was my thing.
Well, I'm curious too that whenever I talk about artificial intelligence, for instance, like with my family or friends that aren't really into it, they always ask me about I guess their go-to is things from pop culture where they're like, oh, Skynet from Terminator and things like that. I'm curious what common questions from your friends and family that aren't involved in artificial intelligence, what do they ask you about it? What do they think AI actually is? And what sort of your response is? Because I always have to tell them Skynet is not the AI that I'm focused on or my research is focused on.
Yeah, I guess we are all a bit tired of these questions. And so my friends and family often say, I'm really seriously getting scared about AI. Yeah? When I say that I work on AI, I said, don't be. It's just a tool we can use properly or not. It's like a knife. And of course, you don't have to be scared, as I have been years trying to teach a robot to push a button. It was so hard, believe me, that we are not really close to Skynet. So that's what I tell, because I've suffered it. So I'm not scared at all. And of course, the only thing we need to do is teaching everyone so that we can all know how it works, what can we expect, and not build false expectations, because only that way we will be able to be in shape to face the risks that it can pose, of course.
No, for sure, for sure. And talking through about terminology in your work, so some of our listeners, might not be as familiar with some of these terms. So I'd love it if you could explain what they are. For instance, neural symbolic approaches to practical applications of AI. What does that mean for you and your work?
Yeah. So if you see all the latest AI techniques, they are mostly built on in terms of black boxes, layers and layers of linear equations, complicated functions that at the end are really impossible for us to interpret what each parameter means. But at the end, big data, they work, right? They figure out the way to produce the output we want it to produce. So, however, there is sometimes that these models, they are so big that we cannot really control what path they take, and they take some shortcuts and they end up suffering some pitfalls, right? So neural symbolic approaches to AI tries to overcome this gap by having, let's say, more interpretable old-fashioned AI techniques that are more interpretable and less complex, let's say rule-based systems, ontologies, linear models, other more interpretable models, in order to embed somehow background domain knowledge into the system, or to correct it or constrain the black box. So the idea is not to get rid of the black box, because of course they are powerful, they're performant, and they achieve the best performance, yeah. But we want to be able to debug them and to have some kind of actionable insight. So for me, having a background in more symbolic approaches to AI, adding the neural component of artificial neural networks that have the capacity to learn on large amount of data, is kind of the way to go, because one cannot give us all. So we need to get the best of both worlds in order to somehow see that the model ends up doing what we expect it to do. Of course, if we imitate the human brain, we know so little that it's hard. So at the end, we need some ways of kind of debugging or having some actionable explanations that can be somehow explain or better debug or to correct the system. And all these neural symbolic approaches take these two approaches and somehow try to combine it in some ways or others. So this is one of the examples I propose. For instance, one with my colleagues, one way to do this is trying to align the explanations of the black box model with the explanations of the domain expert. This is what we call the explainable neural symbolic learning methodology, or XNSIL, or the gray box explainable AI, to try to have a bit of both worlds and try to see if we get what we will expect. Sometimes it's not the case and it still might be correct. So we need to be very careful for what the model is actually learning. It might be something that is not causal, it's just correlational. So we need to really look for this. And we have some applications we have worked with, like in, for instance, trying to predict with some psychiatrists, some colleagues in Poland, to predict the bipolar or depression disorder with just audio signals, or we try to explain and align these explanations with the experts. And another application, not in the health domain, but also compositional approach, to be able to better explain when we recognize an object by its parts. So we want, if a network classifies this facade of a building as Muslim style, we want that the parts it detects also belong to the Muslim architecture component. So these are just some examples that try to break down a bit how we think when we explain why something is classified as such.
All right. So I recently saw that you wrote about, Natalia, explainable AI taxonomies. And I'd love to learn more, one, about what explainable AI taxonomies are, and that are explainable taxonomies something that we need more of today to improve explainable AI? Do you think that they're useful?
Yes, definitely. This, if you see our most successful article with near 5,000, over 5,000 citations, proposes not one, several taxonomies. It tries to clarify all the concepts and different opportunities and challenges that the explainable AI is facing towards achieving responsible AI systems. In fact, I think it has been very successful because we break down not one, but several ways of seeing the explainable AI domain or landscape of tools and techniques. It's not easy. It took us a while to try to agree on this taxonomy because some techniques, of course, can be classified in 2 or 3 ways. And it's not unique either. There are the research community sometimes doesn't agree on these terms, explainability, interpretability, and sometimes they speak interchangeably. Others make distinctions. So at least if you hear both and you want to have nuanced concept, we think we did a good job trying to break down a bit these nuanced terms, and the taxonomies for sure help trying to discriminate how to approach the field, since the field is growing at a too fast pace, and it's hard to catch up for a newcomer, and even for people working in the field, it's hard to catch up with so much avalanche of papers. And so yes, definitely we need more, and ideally we will need agreement too, but sometimes the second is not so easy.
What would it take to get agreement?
Perhaps there is the lack of standards. There are some standards starting to come out. NIST has done a proposal very, very recently, and in trustworthy AI, there are taxonomies also just coming up. Very interesting, trying to link some indicators to some principles and some standards. And the thing is that even standard, there are several that are being built up, and there's not a unique one. So I think the challenge is designing the systems with these standards in mind, which is something we are not used to, but we really need to change the chip, as we say, and start not only looking at this when a product is built, because it's often quite late. So yes, definitely we need more, because it forces us to break the problem and to specialize on the real niche that needs to be tackled.
Thank you for that. Natalia, in your recent paper, you mentioned 3 explainability terms: data explainability, model explainability, and post hoc explainability. How are these terms similar and different?
Yeah, so there are many levels, of course, of in the same way that there are many ways of providing transparency as one principle. You have communication, explainability, traceability. If we take explainability, we can further also break down into different notions of explainability. So if we talk about data explainability, it's going to all revert back to our design phases and see if it should provide us some kind of reasoning about if our data was diverse enough. If it's biased, it's going to show off if there are some lack of representation of some class, if it can lead to some bias and discrimination. And if we have model explainability, we are going to have some notion regarding the decision process that the network or the model or the neural network, can be any model, it's coming up to that decision in terms of some decision steps, perhaps, from the input to the output. And if we, in the third case, if we have post hoc explainability, which are indeed most of the techniques nowadays, they just take a model, it's already trained with whatever data it was provided at that moment of training, and we take an input, an output, and try to explain for a given sample normally how this output was reached. And this is sometimes not even having access to the internals of the model. That's why it's more, let's say, post hoc. It should not affect during training. And it also leaves us, of course, less freedom to kind of revert the model sometimes, although it could be as well done. So yeah, this is a bit kind of the different points of view of looking at the explainability, let's say.
Thank you. Natalia, there's a lot, I understand there's a lot of work around explainability and AI just in general. And I'm curious because you are in this field and you've read a lot of research papers and you know a lot of people, that what are you most excited about right now in this field?
Sure. There is really a lot of things going on. There is hard to keep up. It's a bit stressing even for doing researchers, users. But right now, I think there are cool ideas, a lot of exciting areas to explore. Even though there is really an avalanche of explainable AI papers, there's still plenty to do. There is still many audiences to satisfy when they demand an explanation, when we have high-risk AI systems that we want to comply with the new AI Act, both the European, the US. It's one of the regulations that are coming. And I feel like it's very difficult sometimes to materialize these principles that are very easy to understand and very much common sense and map into concrete protocols, methods, pipelines, measurable practices. It demands change management departments, new whole teams in order to assess all this auditing that is going to be required. So I want to work on developing methods that will help us audit this system so that we can build trust and we can see them more as helpful tools and not just as evil stealers of our human rights, because we just need to be much more careful and educated about them. So some ideas I would say that I'm excited about, it will be, for instance, building some AIs that could explain what fails when humans communicate. For instance, just human to human, we also have trouble communicating. So imagine human and machine communication with generative models like ChatGPT. So it's kind of when we speak different vocabularies, idioms, domain-specific languages, those can make communicating a task to be achieved quite difficult. So wouldn't it be nice actually if the AI could tell what the other agent is trying to get, or what is actually understanding when you ask him something, or what is the information the other agent is actually lacking in order to help you? So for instance, bureaucracy will be really cool. It will be a hassle that it will die, right? So I would love to have those kind of systems, because I spend hours every day doing some kind of bureaucratic thing, and still no single lack of AI, and still it's so hard to get your things done. So other area that I could encourage students or people not knowing what project to get on could be machine learning. My colleagues at the University of Modena in Italy are working on this, among other people. It's a promising application of, or let's say, correcting, for instance, biases of models, or the right to forget, or perhaps just fixing or adapting to new knowledge. In this same line, also, we could say that learning continually in these ever evolving systems, correcting, being able to detect when the system varies and becomes obsolete or incorrect. So we are going to do a lot of bookkeeping on these models. Yeah, so I think this is a lot of exciting things, and of course also everything that has to do with multimodal system. I think so far we have been very, let's say, kind of numb, or like, let's say, using only vision or only language, and at the end we communicate with we are multimodal, multi-view. We have different sense. So AI should also work with all these data modalities, and explanations should align. And this is very often not the case. And I think there is a lot of work to do there. So I think this is quite exciting area to work. Yeah, I think this is all. But you can read the future work sections of my last papers if you want more ideas.
Thinking about the regulation side of things and understanding that the US, for instance, and the EU have different regulations in the works here, because the show is focused on health professionals, how do you believe the new AI regulations in Europe, for instance, are going to impact health professionals?
It's a good question. So today I was reading a paper that it really emphasized that those aspects. So in one way, governments want to have AI regulated so that it can build trust and it can help automate processes. We can develop economies, right? And this is of course good. But on the other hand, private corporations, companies prefer to be much more careful, and they're investing a lot of efforts in preparing teams, in having a lot of auditing, validation, verification. All the AI life cycle requires many, many more checks. So, of course, to comply with all this regulation could be seen as stifling innovation or having it more demanding and difficult. So my fear, and I guess it's not only my fear, is that it can stop down a bit innovation, but that's why we need to have very seamless processes, and at the same time as we need to avoid risk. So in terms of high risk AI system, which is, let's simplify and put the focus there, domain expert, of course, have all the right to be worried and to be questioning the deployment of these systems, such as in the medical field. So I'm just submitting an application on explainable AI on life sciences, and it's really necessary for these fields where there are drug discovery, there can be health records and patients' lives at stake. Explainability is really key, and sometimes even explainability is hackable, or like fair washing, like fairness can be, let's say, washable or hackable. So one technique is not enough. One principle is not enough. At the end, we need to make trustworthy AI. But I guess regulation will need to lead the way, even though it always goes behind technology. But I guess we need to work hand in hand, as well as with ethics and ethics board. So I guess that's the only way. I'm working with the domain expert. It's the only way, so that they can trust us and educating us mutually in order to build systems much more closer and much more together than we used to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm really glad that you mentioned ethics as part of all of this too. That's a whole separate podcast talking about ethics and AI. But I'm also curious too, like just sticking a little bit with the new regulations that at your university, because of these new regulations, is it hard for you to carry out your research, specifically from a technical standpoint, for training and testing large language models?
Well, of course, these technologies require so much compute that indeed not everybody can train from scratch. So sometimes it's a bit hard to. It's out of question. Let's say let's develop a new language model, but luckily the open source community is showing that it's winning, and let's say these are being democratized, but still there's still some risk that all these models, the powerful ones, stay, of course, under paywall, which is also understandable. But yeah, this is a bit worrying me, and it's not so easy for fundamental research to compete or to be able to cope with this fast advancement. But we will still have to go to basics. There is still plenty of improvements we can do. The explainability is still not solved. Black models will still be black. We need to still work on many different aspects to simplify them, to compress models. There are many things we can do. Yes. It's difficult, but there's plenty of interesting work to do, and still it won't stop us. Yeah, there are still needs for computer scientists. AI will not do our job for sure.
Well, that's good for especially for all the students that are currently working on degrees in computer science related fields, that there are, going to still be jobs for them and work for them to do. Because we asked this question of every guest, that our closing question, to see if you had any ideas to offer students for a research project. Is there something that you'd love to see students work on? Any ideas you have?
Yeah, so let's say, I think in terms of explainability and healthcare, I think ever-changing system or systems that learn continually, it's still a challenge. I mean, it's like a orthogonal problem, but it's still very hard to control, like what needs to be selectively forgotten and or relearn or refresh. Sometimes catastrophic forgetting is to be avoided. Other forgetting is necessary to cope with the advancements and new knowledge. On the other hand, yeah, I think before I also mentioned multimodality of, let's say, models that can fuse different modalities of data. And on the other hand, we also need to compress this knowledge, because this cannot be feasible in terms of energy. So green AI, being more efficient, and because the carbon emissions are important, and sometimes this is ignored. And of course, climate change, AI for climate change, I think is still very, very important, because that also reverts in our health. And of course, the standards, contributing to develop standards could be also very interesting in terms of developing new techniques that could become the standard. So I think there is interest on developing very, let's say, useful tools that can help us audit these systems at the different stages. So from the design until the retirement in the AI cycle. So yeah, and then explaining, let's say, interactive processes where sometimes we might not even know what a prompt engineer is trying to tell us. Like, it might be even hard to translate what's the mental model he's trying to convey. So when we have explainability that goes beyond the model, and in different stages, different processes, different administration, stakeholders, how do we make sense of all this, where the system breaks and where it doesn't? So let's say just go on giants' shoulders and look at explainability from different heights will be good also.
Thank you for that. So one last thing we like to do on the podcast is offer our guests an opportunity to give a shout out to their university, any colleagues that you want to give a shout out to, or share any news papers that you're working on. Is there anything that you'd like to share, Natalia?
Sure. I want to give a shout out to my Department of Computer Science and AI. It's always doing great job with the very ambitious projects from all ranges of many, including trustworthy AI and explainability, indeed. And PhD students at DaSCI or Andalusian Data Science Institute, and our faculty of computer engineering. I must say that Granada is one of the universities that receives and sends the most exchange students, so you are most welcome to join and visit. And I also take the advantage to invite you to 3 congresses, like we are on a roll this fall. Actually, this week, if you happen to be nearby, there is the event, a conference called Talking About AI, 16th, 17th November in Granada. They are all free attendance, the 3 conferences. The second is Andalusia International AI Conference, 22nd, 23rd of November in Granada as well. We have government and also public representatives. And the third one is the one I organize. It's called Andaluz.ia event for researchers. Basically, it's made by Andalusians, and it showcases the work of Andalusian researchers abroad or people that work in Andalusia. All of them are free attendance, and I invite you to join if you can. This one, the last one, is 21st of December, so you have a bit more time to join. So you are welcome to join and to visit. Thanks a lot for inviting me and giving the opportunity, and I hope to be in touch and learn more about your lab.
Natalia, it's been very much a pleasure to be able to speak with you today, and we really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
To you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in and for following the show. The Health and Explainable AI podcast is produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory at University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences Department of Health Information Management. I'm Jordan Gass-Poore. Thanks for listening.